Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is Questions You Never Thought You Could Ask in Church. This is the podcast and the radio broadcast where we invite you, the listener, to drive the agenda by texting in the questions that you have about God, about Christianity, the Bible and theology, spirituality and comparative religions, and everything in between. Where we ask you to text in the questions that you might be afraid to ask your religious leader, in a church, or some other kind of setting. Maybe they're questions you don't know who to ask. Maybe you don't feel like you've been given good answers in the past. Maybe you feel like you've gotten the runaround, or maybe you're just flat out embarrassed to let it come out. You know what? We believe that God wants you to ask the questions that you have. We think it's part of the spiritual journey. And we'd love your questions here. We'll take them openly and honestly in real time as we can on the spot, and do the best job we can to help navigate you. Pretty easy. You just text to 815-314-0363. Give you that one more time. It's 815-314-0363. My name's David Gadini, here in the studio today with Andrew Metcalf, Steve Wells, and Kent Jones producing, talking about the favorite white noise and sine waves that you like to listen to in the car when you drive, huh?
We were working on the speakers a little bit yesterday, so we had some nice pink noise going in.
Yeah. So that's pink noise. What's the difference between pink noise and white noise?
So white noise is a completely flat signal. Pink noise adjusts for how your ears are more sensitive at certain frequencies.
So do you have to get like the pink noise personally tailored to your own ear?
No, it's a general like human ear, because they're more
Gotcha.
sensitive between like 1,000 and 3,000 hertz.
Okay.
Because that's where the human voice is.
So it's kind of like white noise is lazy and pink noise is focused.
Yeah, it depends on what you're tuning.
It's like white
for.
noise is for bats and dogs and stuff, or
Sure.
okay.
Which we know that we've got a couple of both in our congregation. So we got a bat. We got to try and be everybody, everything to everybody.
We have had an infestation of crickets going on in the church. So
is that a plague?
Someone, that's one of the plagues.
I think
frogs.
I think that's someone with a phone, their phone, and it's got like a cricket sound, and they're just
no. Because I found one up on the stage, and I took care of it.
Nice.
So I just have like this vision of getting a big banner that says like WP, a number of other letters, and a plus, and we can arrange it like a rainbow banner and say noise for every stripe and variety.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I like that.
What do you think?
Because then
is this for our church or is this just for you?
But then here's the thing: it's kind of like an insurance, like a coverage, a policy, because now no one can say anything about the sound in church.
No, not at all. Not at all. Whatever your sound preference might be.
Sorry.
Yeah. That's why the plus is important. Yeah. Because we don't want to limit it, And the acronym gets dumb after like 9 letters. So
it's true.
It's just not helpful here anymore, Well, Andrew,
that was a very fun start to the show.
It all depends on how you identify.
It does. And again, Steve, we come across this every single week.
Dogs, cats, bats.
Every week.
I think we should do it with temperature in the church as well. Complete spectrum depending on where you're sitting of temperature preference. And I don't know. I think we're on the start of something here.
I think we should blindfold everyone, and then we seat them.
There you go.
I don't remember who I was
That would be fun.
Well, you got to spin them around 5 times first, so they're disoriented. I don't know where I'm at, man.
They're literally sitting on stage.
Welcome to church. Here's your blindfold.
Yeah, right. Yeah, black bag over the head, and you.
Putting the faith in fellowship.
Yes.
You got it.
I did that the other day.
You hope we're not going to light the church on fire, but you don't know.
So a new thing Barbie and I and Paul and Maya have been doing is playing pickleball down at the tennis court. Which
you're becoming kind of like
super fun.
Like the Uber athlete in this.
I
love like the 5th time you brought this up.
And basketball.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but just for a challenge, I thought, hey, hun, I'm going to walk home from the park with my eyes closed, blind.
Yeah.
So because I just wanted to figure out well, how does this work? Am I using kind of like a bat, like my radar,
your echolocation?
And that's how we did it. She would snap her fingers and I would follow it. So the neighbors are probably like, what in the world is going on? But it was super fun.
Well, don't you guys have some like whistle call you do in like shopping malls and stuff like that too? Like, go, hey, Barbie, that's it.
Yeah.
If you're like walking down an aisle and you just hear like this like little whistle coming out from like 4 aisles over.
I mean, that happens all the time.
Barbie's calling Steve. Come here, boy. Come here.
My family does too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Joking aside, it works, huh?
Well,
Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, you got to be careful who's in the company, around you at that point,
Just dog barks.
Yeah.
All right, Andrew, take us to the inbox. What do
we need to get there.
Let's get into some deep theology now.
Yeah, right.
First one here. Do you believe that God's blessing on Israel and for the Jewish people have been replaced by the church?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I know what you're getting at here. I don't really prefer the word replace. I think a better way to think about this is that God has elected a people that he calls Israel. And I do not believe that Israel is synonymous with the term Jew as it often gets used today or even in the time of Jesus. Israel more or less gets appropriated through Jesus to mean the people of God. So the church, as we would call it today, is grafted in. It becomes a part of what God calls Israel and the promise he gives to the people of Israel back with the patriarchs, right? So I do not think that the nation state of Israel today is the chosen people of God by virtue of being the nation state of Israel in that geographical location. Nor do I think that just because someone is a biological descendant of Abraham, or maybe better put, Jacob, if you can put it that way, that makes them part of the biblical perspective of Israel. Rather, it is the elect people that God has chosen that he is putting his blessing upon. So that would incorporate, of course, not only Gentiles, as the New Testament will make a big point of, and thereby extension, the groups and gatherings of people that we call in shorthand the church.
Yeah, maybe think of like the different bloodlines throughout the Bible as we like trace Jesus's lineage and those types of things. And then I've been watching the Harry Potter movies recently. So it's like a pure blood versus a
mudblood,
and
right, and a muggle, and
so I don't think it's not necessarily tied to that anymore. It seems like it was, but now it's more the body of believers as a whole. Is that kind of...
Yeah. And, and you and I are sitting here as total, like, Israel mudbloods. Mm-hmm. We're not natural descendants of Abraham, or at least I don't think you are, Andrew. Maybe you are. Who knows what's back in the recesses of time, but not to our knowledge anyway. But yeah, and I think this is maybe helpful too. I'll throw one more thing out there. And I mentioned this earlier. We use certain terms synonymously in a way that we shouldn't. And the terms that you hear are Israelite, Israeli, and Jew. An Israeli is someone who is a citizen of the modern state of Israel, formed since 1948. An Israelite is one of those people in the Old Testament, and I'm talking patriarchal era, I'm talking King David, I'm talking all that kind of kingdom of Israel time, like 1000 BC up until its fall. And then Jew becomes a name that's slapped upon the remaining people of Israel by foreigners. Actually, it's short for Judah, because at 587 BC, all that remained of the nation or the kingdom of Israel was basically the tribe of Judah holed up in Jerusalem. So when you displace the final people, they just, we all nickname everyone. They just call them Jews for short. So at one level, it can be very specifically someone of the tribe of Judah. But by the time of Jesus, it's really applied to anyone who had, regardless of their tribal descendancy, lineage back to that original covenant people. But I do find making the distinction today is helpful, because from a New Testament perspective, you can talk about Jews as a people group ethnically, or you can talk about Jews as a spiritual group based on belief. And there's a distinction in that. There's a difference in that. So there you go.
And that's gonna show up differently throughout the biblical text as well? Like, it's not like those are the same word in the original language, and the translators are picking, like, are they talking about the Jew or the Israelites or Israel, or those are all different words there. It's not like they're synonymous.
Yeah, they are different words. However, I'm not actually giving you the words out of the Bible. I mean, Jew is, of course, a word that you'll find in the Bible. Israeli, you're never going to find in the Bible. I mean, it was written before 1948. So, I mean, it's just not how they referred to them. But far more common is more general terms to refer to the covenant people of God, literally as the people of God. It doesn't even define it by the term Israelite, or sometimes it'll use the term like a Hebrew, if you will, or more often than not children of Abraham or something like that. So yeah, all different kinds of terms. Then they using the same term all the time in the same way, and so you just got to kind of be on your game a little bit when you're looking at the language. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, 815-314-0363.
I'm glad you guys answered or talked about that one because I had no interest and no input. So
I could tell a little bit. I could tell.
That's why, Andrew and I are like this end of the table, right? Steve,
Yeah.
we got about 6 feet up.
I really should move this to the middle.
I'm over here winking at Kent just for entertainment.
No, we're going to keep Steve, we're going to keep Steve at the far end.
All right, moving on.
Someone's looking for some cliff notes.
All right.
So we'll see.
So this person obviously is over the age of 40 because they didn't say Spark Notes.
It's
Right.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they might have gotten this from Steve because you like the
quick
short
answers.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can you give us the Cliff Notes version of the doctrine of election and reprobation?
Reprobation. Yeah. Like you reprobate. It's still not happening. All right.
And if God has already chosen who will be saved and who will be passed over, can any of our evangelistic efforts or lack thereof actually change what God has predetermined?
Yeah, no, I probably can't give you a Cliff Notes version on this. It's not going to do it justice, but I'm going to give it a half-baked attempt. All right.
Perfect.
You want a timer?
A timer might be interesting.
Like 25 minutes?
25 minutes.
Is that going to be enough?
Set the clock there. Set your stopwatch at 25 minutes, Steve.
I'll be in the bathroom. Got some reading to do.
Text me when you're done.
Cliff Notes version. Let's see what we can do. Doctrine of election is basically this. It's the idea that God can freely choose who he wants to be saved or to be his people or to put his blessing on. Period. That's all it is. Reprobation would be somewhat of the opposite of that. And it can be looked at from different angles. Some might look at it as being those who God has not chosen. By virtue of not choosing this group, he has more or less indirectly chosen a different group not to get his blessing, right?
Gotcha.
Or to be saved, even for that matter. Or it can be viewed a different way. It can be viewed that God chooses people freely or elects them of his own choice, if you will, and they can reject that. And to be a reprobate is to be someone who turns their back on it, refuses it, spurns it, scorns it, something like that. You know what I mean? So this is what the doctrine of election and reprobation is getting at. And there's a variety of opinions on how it works. It always gets into those deep questions that frequently come on our show and even happen in our conversations about, predestination and free will and all that kind of stuff. I do find that the word election in Greek is interesting. It's actually eklektos is how you'd pronounce it. And it's where we get our word eclectic from. And so I think it actually does a better job than the English word election of getting at the freedom of God to just kind of choose this, choose that, choose that.
Do what he wants.
As he wants. You know what I mean? So to get to the second part of this question, if God has chosen who will be saved and who will be passed over, that is an assumption that God will choose who will be passed over.
Yeah.
But let's run with the assumption. Can any of our evangelistic efforts, therefore, actually change what God predetermines? It depends who you ask. The answer you get depends on the theologian and theological tradition that you ask. John Calvin would say no. He would say that what God has foreordained before space and time is what will be. I don't agree with him. The majority of Christianity, both historically and currently, really doesn't agree with him. Doesn't mean that should render him wrong. You investigate it for yourself and flush it out. But I think the Bible does teach that our evangelistic efforts have a lot of impact, just like I think that the Bible teaches prayer has a lot of impact. How could prayer change the mind of a God who already knows all things, including the future, right? But he says it does. And I might not be able to figure out how, but he invites me to trust him that it does. And God invites us to do the same thing with evangelistic efforts. He says, this is efficacious. This does something. I work through this. And you see it modeled by Jesus, the apostles, and 2,000 years of Christian tradition, right? So if the Bible tells us to do it, if Jesus models how to do it, if the disciples follow with a fervency in doing it, it's all kind of leading me down a path going, this is probably important and not just jumping through a hoop. So you might not have all the logical ends tidied up on this one, don't let that keep you from the clear call of what God is just calling you to do.
Yeah, and it seems weird that the phrasing of the second question, and if God has already chosen who will be saved and who will be passed over, that I think there's a difference between God choosing who's going to be saved and who isn't versus God knowing who is going to be saved and who isn't. Like the choosing takes a very active role in that no one else gets to decide. I've decided this, but God knowing who will be saved and who doesn't, it not that it takes the power away from him, but it puts that free will back on us.
And that is how many people will nuance it. Mm-hmm. However, I just want to caution that when the Bible talks about election, it often talks about it from the perspective of God's sovereign power and ability to do whatever the heck he wants. Mm-hmm. I even love what Jesus says in John 15. You didn't choose me, I chose you to go and bear much fruit. You see God choose Abraham in Genesis 12, not because there was anything special about Abraham. He just kind of showed up and went, you see God do the same thing with Jacob. So I think there is some both and here. And one answer can't apply to all situations.
Yeah.
But I just put that out there to kind of foil against putting all our eggs in that one basket.
Yeah. I'm always curious as to the why behind some of these questions. And, a lot of times we don't get the why, right?
Yeah.
So we have to try and read into some of these things. And whether we're right or wrong, who knows, right? But I'm reading into that a little bit, at least from where I can see. And it's like, so is this have to do with works? Meaning, like, are they thinking that, okay, so if you're chosen or not chosen, predestination or not, if we can change things, then is it something that I need to do? And is it, am I doing enough?
Yeah, they're sitting there in anxiety
Right.
and fear or despair or just like consternation going, am I actually elect? You guys ever go down that path in your spiritual journey? Wondering, it's a little bit different than am I saved?
Yeah.
But like, what if God didn't choose me, or getting all kind of hot and bothered about that?
Yeah, I think definitely in like I don't know if not so much in the macro view, but more in the micro, like with just things in your life, like, okay, did God choose me to really do this or to move here or to take this job? But in terms of the macro salvation eternity, I don't necessarily think about that often.
Is that the question you ask yourself every time you get out of bed in the morning and drive to Fellowship of Faith? Did God really choose me to,
Are we really serious about this?
Yeah, right.
What's going on?
Did I have any choice in this matter?
I'm pretty sure he chose for me to stay home today.
God has elected me to watch a lot of TV,
Yeah, how do you use this to justify poor behavior or procrastination?
Right. Yeah, but if you are someone listening with all sincerity who has really gotten, spiritually messed up over this, and I know I've known people who have. I've known people who it's created anxiety and panic to such degrees that it led to a lot of even institutionalization. Just for the mental weight and burden and break that came from it all. There's a sad tradition of that in Christian history. Mm-hmm. And, if you are one of those persons, I just want you to hear this today. Step away from what you don't know and embrace what you do and which is clear. And what is clear from Christ in the Bible is that all who call on the name of the Lord will be saved. That whoever believes in Jesus as God's one and only Son will not perish but have eternal life. That is a promise to you. It is explicit. It is clear. And there's 100 more right behind it that I can quote. Cling to that as opposed to worrying about what you will never truly discover maybe in the theoretical realm that you want, which is how does God's election work behind space and time?
Yeah. And
Kelly nailed this real quick. Kelly says, if there's no music on Sunday, we know Steve is at home. God's will. LOL. We'll find out on Sunday.
Let's capture that and get ready to put it on the screen, if we need to.
Sorry, there's no sermon today. Dave felt called to stay home.
We got a comment here from another Steve who's listening today. Great having you with us, Steve. He says, I've stopped caring about what's at the end. It drives me crazy. I lean on today and the fruit in it. When I'm looking, when I look for the blessings, I have comfort. Yeah, there's great wisdom in that, especially when it comes to the promises of God. And how's Jesus put it in Matthew chapter? Is it? I was going to say 5. I think it's 6. don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough trouble of its own, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Each day has enough trouble of its own. I'm kind of butching Jesus here on this, but it's all predicated in the thing where he's saying, don't worry. Yeah, don't worry. Seek first the kingdom of God. All other things will be added. Don't worry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's like helpful, like you said, to like dwell on the things that we know and that God has told us and revealed, because that, the election versus reprobation.
Yeah.
I keep thinking probation.
You're going to be working this word over the next 3 days.
Probation. It's reprobation.
Yeah. You're back to probation. You're reprobating.
But it's like focus on the like the reality of the situation, your blessings in your current situation. And I think also like it can be very weird trying to delve into these things in your own brain, like in your own head, and that can drive you crazy. But if there's someone that you can talk to about it, that is immeasurably helpful. Yeah, because you're then bouncing your ideas off someone else versus just letting them free reign in your brain, which doesn't always work well for me. So it's like, find someone you can have those conversations with. Right. And you're like, hey, I'm struggling with this, or text them into the podcast, or call up Steve. He'll chat with you.
Yeah,
anytime. Here's Steve's cell number. Just get ready to write it down.
Here it is. Just 3 digits, 911. He'll talk. I'm looking at Steve's comment here. I have stopped caring about what's at the end. It drives me crazy. I lean on today in the first, when I look for the blessings, I have comfort. I understand he's referring to himself in this. And I completely understand that. I think the dangerous part because I can fall into that trap as well, right? Where I'm thinking about myself and where I'm at with this. And I think if we don't think about the end and what is eternal, then I think we stop looking at others as well, because it's not just about us, right? So it's about, what Jesus did. He wasn't thinking about himself the whole time he was on the earth. He was thinking about what he had to do for others the entire time. So anyway, and I'm not saying that's what Steve's saying. It just led me to that thought process.
Yeah, because it could be easily taken to be a very self-centered life, which I don't think this Steve is getting at. Like you said,
I know that Steve. He is very self-centered. So.
I love you, Steve.
Well, I love you too, but let's agree on one thing. You're my brother in Christ.
Hey, text questions to 815-314-0363. Again, 815-314-0363. Andrew, I'm really looking forward to this next one. We saw this one coming yesterday, and we've got artwork on it. So
we do have artwork for it. There's visual aids. If you're watching,
if you're watching
online,
today, on Facebook, right? Yeah.
If you're not, Steve will do an interpretive description.
Yeah. You need to see it.
I don't even. This is going to be new to me. I don't even know this.
So the question. I realize you're busy, and this question is probably a trifle, but my hope is that you'll find it interesting and help me out as well. I was looking at the minor variant below, pretending to get back to my biblical Greek for a small group Bible study. I was confused by the reference to Aleph and Sinaiticus.
Aleph Sinaiticus.
I couldn't even get reprobation right. Referenced in both options. Any idea how that can be used on UBS 3rd edition?
Yeah, which is not a hard drive, like kind of supplement thing that you plug in either.
Not
UBS,
USB.
Yeah, right. Your UBS, which stands for United Bible Society 3rd Greek Text New Testament Edition. Gotcha. So let me, for the people who aren't seeing, well, even for the people who are seeing, because it's not going to help you much more, right? But let me kind of walk you through what's going on here in this question. So the English Bible, if you're, of course, using an English-speaking Bible today, but the modern translations of the Bible that we have today are just that. They're translations. The original New Testament was written in the Greek language, and it was written in a very street Greek, if you will, called Koine, or Common Greek, back, in the 1st century AD. It was kind of like how English works today. You might have your own native language, but everyone kind of around the world speaks English, more or less. Well, this was true for Jesus and his disciples. Greek was the kind of world language of the time, and good chances everyone had some degree of Greek. Certainly the people who wrote the Bible did, including Jesus' disciples, despite the fact that they were Jewish descendants, born and raised in the nation of Israel at the time. So here's where it's going. We have translations, right? But the translations aren't off like one original copy of the Greek letter that, like, let's say John wrote or something like that, sitting behind a museum. What we
I've
have,
been meaning to tell you,
you have,
I have that.
You
Yeah.
have.
I've
it.
just been holding on to it.
Oh, keep it safe, man, because I tell you that has some value behind it. So what the listener sent in was a copy of the first page of 1 John in the Greek New Testament in this UBS 3, or United Bible Society's 3rd edition Greek New Testament. And if you could see it, it's actually pronounced Ioannes A. It's where we get Ioan, John or Johann. I think we should start calling it the letter of Johann. Don't you?
Yeah.
And A, letters and numbers are simultaneous symbols. So A is 1.
I find it interesting that the headers are in English, though.
Yeah. Thank the Lord for
God is light.
Right.
And then here's what follows.
That's the Cliff Notes
Yeah.
version. Just read the headers.
So
Okay.
even in like this edition of the Greek New Testament, you have some English helps
Mhm.
coming your way. Here's what's going on in a very complicated, but I find actually interesting and important question. And here's why. Because people will push back against the Bible a lot, going, well, how do you know that's what it originally said? Because all you've got is copies of copies of copies of copies, and all these copies are different, and who knows what they say, and who knows what they agree with, and we all know how the telephone game is played, and it's kind of a common foil for people to reject the Bible and certainly its call on people's life. And I always see Christians kind of caught, like church workers included, caught like deer in the headlight when this question going, and then coming up with like stupid schlock, like, well, you just got to believe, or whatever, which at some level, I get what you're saying, but how is that helpful to anyone, let alone challenging those who are using some kind of false foil to reject God's call in their life? So, yeah, we don't have the original, but we've got thousands of copies. Thousands of copies. And there's some really smart guys throughout the history of the Christian tradition who devote their lives to studying these copies, comparing these copies, counting and cataloging the differences in these copies. And what they do is they codify them. And in Greek New Testaments, what they do is they give a big giant footnote thing called a critical apparatus at the bottom, which literally mentions those variations. So it's not like it's some secret or some wool is being pulled over the dark. And you know what you find when you read this? As fascinating as it sounds right now, it's a really, really boring line of work because the differences are so stupid and inane and so boring that there's like nothing interesting or provocative to even find. So 3,000 manuscripts over here put Christ Jesus, 2,000 manuscripts over here put Jesus Christ, and 1,000 manuscripts over here leave out the word Jesus, and they just say Christ. Well, I don't know about you guys, but my faith is rocked. And this is what a lot of them are. And so there's a very important manuscript called Codex Sinaiticus. Cool story on this. It wasn't found until the 19th century, and it was found up at St. Catherine's Monastery. Guess where? At Mount Sinai.
Yes.
Where Mount Sinai is attributed to be, like the Mount Sinai, like where Moses got the 10 Commandments. Well, there's a Orthodox monastery that was there in the 19th century, maybe to this day, I'm not sure. And there was this 19th century Greek scholar who had the same issue back in the 19th century that people in the 21st century are asking today, when even more people were challenging the accuracy and the historicity of the Bible. And he devoted his life to finding as many manuscripts. I mean, total Indiana Jones guy. Going 19th century Egypt and Sinai and going to these, I mean, it's just great. His name was Westcott. And he's there at this monastery and he notices that this, and true story, you can look this up. He's noticing that there's this pile of sheaves and manuscripts and stuff in these baskets over by the fireplace. And he's watching these monks stoke the fire by burning these old manuscripts. And he freaks out, but he's got to kind of play it cool because he doesn't also want them to know that they've got this buried treasure on their hand. And so he very gently convinces them to maybe burn something else and asks if he can investigate it. And he ends up finding some of the most important and earliest copies of the Bible that were available at this time.
Is that a monastery?
Yeah.
How did they not know what they had?
Well, they knew probably what it was, but remember, they're practicing writing. Do you save all your homework from school? Do you save
Andrew, man.
everything that you like? Imagine a pre-word processor. Did you save everything that you would draft before you'd get to a final copy? To them, the final product was important, not the lineage of how it got there. It wasn't a question they were asking.
Interesting.
But an archaeologist and a historian, and I think most people on the block today, are asking a different sets of questions. So it's rubbish to them, right? You don't need the first draft. We got this. That's what we copied from. Now we got pretty drafts, and it's getting worn out. And so it's abbreviated by what you pronounced Aleph, which is the first letter of the Hebrew Bible. And it basically appears here, and they're showing a couple of variations. And it's 1 John 1, verse 4. And I'm just going to read it here today. And it says this. Let me put full chapter. We write this to make, and I'm reading a 2011 NIV, we write this to make our joy complete. What is John writing to make our joy complete? Well, he prefaces it by saying that which is from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked at with our hands and have touched, meaning Jesus, like we're eyewitnesses in every way. This we proclaim concerning the word of life. The life appeared. We have seen it and testified to it. So they're witnessing. Remember the earlier thing? We proclaim to you the eternal life, which was with the Father and has appeared to us. We proclaim to you what we have seen and heard, so that you also may have fellowship with us, and our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. We write this to make our joy complete. Well, if you look, it's footnoted. And what you can do in your Bible is look at the footnote, or using this, I'm an electronic version. I click the footnote, and some manuscripts say, we write this to make your joy complete. Is your faith rocked? Is trust in the Bible shaken?
Yes.
And some manuscripts have our, some manuscripts have your. Codex Sinaiticus is one of the main players indicating which it should be. And this is what they call text critics do. And like I said earlier, it sounds really exciting when you're telling stories about 19th century Indiana Jones. But when you actually get into it, it's the most mind-numbing work. For me, it would be. I mean, praise be to God, there's people that love it. Praise be to God, there's people that like to do accounting and do taxes too, right? But there's people that really feed on this kind of thing. And it's just kind of a text variant that he shared going, how do I read this? Should it be our? Should it be your? And how does it relate to an earlier text variant that he was kind of mixing up? And that's basically the gist of it.
Interesting.
So there you go.
So I have a question about the verses you read. Who is we in that?
John and whoever he's talking about in his collective testimony.
Okay.
So it could be his local faith community. It could be the greater witness of the apostles, even though they're all dead by this point. But you know what I mean? Like the tradition of the apostles, that the people of God, as we kind of exist collectively, writing to you individually. Who knows? Maybe he's just kind of like holed up with a buddy and they're writing it together, you know? And it's like, and it's that. I mean, it isn't
Frank
really
was hanging out with him next door, and he's like, well, yeah, it's from the two of us.
Why not? But it isn't really defined, but you really do get the sense that if it is an our, that obviously the other person is a believer and an eyewitness and things of that nature too. And if it's a your, the we, well, who knows? Maybe I'm with your mom and she really wants you to be saved, and we just want your joy to be complete. You know, there's a lot of room for speculation on that, and it's kind of fun to go down those rabbit holes. But at the end of the day, big question mark.
Yeah. So a little bit on the side of that, where we're going there, where people will get into, and I've had conversations with people who say, well, you know, this transcript is different than this, and of course it's telephone, and you know, it's been watered down, and I'll say, well, okay, so you're telling me this, so which one have you read?
Exactly, right.
And then they'll say, well, or which one have you compared it to?
Yeah,
then?
Which one's throwing you off here?
Well, I haven't. That's just, you know, what I've heard. I'm saying, so you're going off of then the exact same things of what the gospel is, of what other people have said.
You're literally a victim of your own telephone
absolutely.
game.
It's like, okay, you understand, you just went 360 right there, right?
Yeah.
You know, so, and the problem is that it's like, you're never going to combatively, you know, prove to someone that this is true, right? I mean, I think that's the work of the Holy Spirit, and that's the work where whatever they're going through in their lives, Jesus has got to get a hold of them. at some point.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to lawyer them into believing.
No,
Yeah.
but it's simply removing some of, I think, those artificial excuses
Mhm.
that people use to keep them at bay, but also sometimes some of the faith-shaking questions that believers will ask
Right.
that rattle them a little bit in their faith
Right.
when the truth behind it is this is far more believable
Right.
than anything else you could ever read. And this is the value of not having just one manuscript behind glass.
Mhm.
Having thousands written by all different kinds of people who didn't have contact with each other in all different kinds of cultures at all different kinds of times, and then seeing how both reliable they are in substance, and yet the difference is also indicating that it's not like one mass-produced thing, gives even more veracity, I think, to the faithfulness and reliability of the biblical witness.
Yeah.
And you
So-
can still see the themes throughout. So whether or not that says your or our isn't really, it's not changing the master theme of
No.
what John is saying in First John.
Right,
It's
right.
it's like if you're taking a singular verse of the Bible and going like, well, this verse says we should do this thing. It's like, okay, but what does that look like in context? What does that look like across all of Scripture? What does that look like to the people in that context versus today's context? And like, I don't know, it seems to be playing that same game of like, I'm going to nitpick this one thing and that's like, cancel it all.
And what's kind of cool is then like the people who research this, they'll try to analyze like how these variants came about. And like you can look at this one and they'll go, well, you do see both themes in the Bible. You see people writing to make other people's joy complete and Jesus talking that way. At other times you'll see people talking about ours. So did this scribe carelessly have like that verse on his brain and he just went your to our really quick? And just like in English where it's like a 1-letter difference between your and our, it's also in Greek a 1-letter difference. So was it typographical? Did someone misread it? Was it a little sloppy? Did it fade? People read stuff out loud and you're writing it. Did I just kind of hear it wrong even if you were clear? Did I just, we auto kind of correct sometimes and things like that. I don't know. But they're both true. Whichever one John originally wrote, they are both true.
Yeah.
It's not like one is, oh, God does not exist. And the other, he does. We better figure this out.
There's a typo that said murder your sister.
Or something like
what?
that. Yeah.
We would, hopefully
Well,
someone would catch that.
For a little practicing exercise, I think what we should do is, if you're listening to this, write up a recap of this podcast today. Send them in, and then we'll side by side them.
Yeah.
And that'll be the exact same thing, right?
Well, and what the pushback to the telephone game too objection is exactly that, because what you had was the apostles and the early faith communities verifying that which was written and said. And that's why you have other things that are written that are not in the Bible, because they're simply like, it doesn't line up.
All right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, we get the extra biblical text.
Homework, yes. Chris
There
has
is-
homework.
Gospel of
Yeah.
Thomas and Judas. And
There is an
things like that.
edition of the King James Bible, though I think it's 5th, maybe 6th edition, where there is a misprint, and what at least in our numbering is the 6th
I remember
commandment.
hearing about it. Yeah.
And they left the word not out. So it reads, you shall commit adultery.
Oh, yeah. Whoops.
It's dangerous territory.
Chris says homework, ? And, I think this is, Chris, you had how many years of teaching and handing out homework? Now it's time for you to actually do homework. So
It's true.
It's true. Yeah, I think
We
we're all
ex-
agreed.
We expect 500 words.
Yeah.
And I'm sure
Would you
she's
agree?
just
Yeah.
she's
Oh,
just
definitely.
bored at home,
You can go ahead and email that into
27 years. Oh my goodness.
Hey, we're a little bit past the top of the hour, but why don't we come up for air here and do a station break really quick? Kent, you got it?
Absolutely. You're listening to Questions You Never Thought You Could Ask in Church right here on 21.6 The Net. This is the place where, well, if you got questions any time of day, 24 hours a day, text them to 815-314-0363, no matter how weird they may be. And if you couldn't follow along with what Dave was reading online there, you were probably going left to right. You should be going right to left when you
No, Greek is left to right, Hebrew's right to left. So no, you're all good.
No
You're all
wonder I
good.
was confused.
Yeah, I know. You just
That's why.
You got it backwards,
There were
man.
no pictures. But you know what? The cool thing is every Wednesday at 12:30 Central, Questions You Never Thought You Could Ask in Church goes live. On Sundays at 9:50 5 a.m. You can grab the pregame out there here right on 216.net, Fellowship of Faith, YouTube, Fellowship of Faith, Facebook, before the worship hour. And then from 10 on, you can just celebrate Jesus and worship with the gang. Wherever you're at in the world, or show up live in person, which is great. And it's great. Check them out. Like, follow, subscribe. If you go to the YouTube, especially if you go to FOF, fellowshipoffaith.org, go to FOF Plus, FOF Plus, right? Yeah. And you can catch everything right there. Just a bunch of great stuff and a great team to just be involved.
That's the Hour of Power, right?
Hour of
Yeah.
Power.
The Hour of Power. I think that's already copyrighted, man. That's
Oh, we're taking it back.
We're taking it.
Sorry.
All right.
Sometimes an hour and a half of power.
Oh, yes.
But
Sometimes.
Depending on
it. HOUR or is it just OUR?
Hour.
It's
of
your
power.
No, it's your. You lost the Y.
Your.
Yeah.
Yes.
At least according to Sinaiticus,
Right.
Hey, we got a comment here about the, it says cool 21.6 t-shirts hanging in the background. Kent, you want to give a shout out?
Big props to Tom Odell from Tom's Productions, creating some swag. We're going to put them up on our website in our store, and you'll be able to jump in there. $15 a piece, or 2 for $25, or 4 for $50.
All right. Can you mix and match? You don't have to get like 4 of the same variety.
We've got 3 different ones. We're going to have some hats up there. We're just going to start giving some swag up.
And if you want to buy a whole case of stuff, just talk to Tom directly.
That's right.
Yeah.
A whole case for $10,000. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think they should be only the beginning to the entire 21.6 outfit. The pants, the socks, the shoes, the leisure suit.
The leisure suit, yes.
Leisure.
I would wear 21.6 net sweatpants for sure.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
Work on it.
I mean, we could also put the FOF on one sleeve, and we could make it.
I'm waiting for the 90.
We can NASCAR this,
300 sponsors.
Yeah, right. All right.
We're trying.
Back to the inbox, 815-314-0363 to text your question in. Andrew, where are we going here?
Well, I think this works well from talking about products and merch and other things like that. If you
Indulgences.
See how I did that? Yeah.
Okay.
If you like a company or business and the products they sell or services they offer, but they openly promote ideology you don't agree with, is it wrong to continue funding them by buying their products or service? Is there anything biblical we can glean, or is it just a personal preference?
Yeah. It's you're not going to get a thus saith the Lord where he outlines the companies, and lays out the parameters. But he doesn't leave it completely free to just go, do what's convenient or do what you want. The passage you want to read is Romans chapter 14. And it talks about how to deal with these disputable matters of the faith, these things that don't have a clear, thus saith the Lord behind it, but are left towards the application of faith and the quest of trying to figure out and do the right thing. And we all come across thousands of these every day, right? Romans chapter 14 is really your go-to place. And it talks about the wrestle in each believer's heart of whether they can do it out of faith or whether it's causing them crisis of conscience or sin, more or less. More than that, it's also dealing with the effect that it has on other believers, that if I am exercising my faith freely in some kind of way, but it's causing someone else to sin, I shouldn't do that anymore because my love for someone else should be greater than my own freedom. And so it's actually a more nuanced argument than a simple formulaic answer that I want to give, but that's enough to kind of get you on the right path. I'd encourage you to go kind of soak in there, read that chapter, maybe a couple times on your own, pray over it and apply it. And I think that's going to help you a lot in this arena.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things we had talked about this summer with our high school youth. We were talking about some ideas of like purity culture and modesty and some of those other things. And it's like, there's not necessarily like, if you look at like modesty, like what should someone wear to church or to somewhere else? It's like, that's not really listed in the Bible anywhere in our modern times. Like,
not by like an itemized list of like,
yeah, exactly.
How short can your shorts be? Mm-hmm. Like what modesty means today would be positively pornographic in other centuries.
Yeah, exactly. So when people are kind of looking for that, or it's all about like, how do you define that, and how does that affect you, or how are you affecting other people? So it's kind of that, do what is going to not compromise your faith or your conscience, and also not someone else.
Yeah.
But it's not like, well, this is the rule, your skirt needs to go past your knees. It's like, that doesn't necessarily exist. But it's an interesting thing to kind of think on, to go, yeah, I guess there isn't necessarily a like biblical morality line for that in regards to specifics. It's more like, do what your conscience tells you and what the Holy Spirit is leading you to.
And it presupposes that above all things, you actually do want to honor God by loving others.
Yeah. Do you want to know the rules so you can get as close to the rules as you can, or do you want to know the rules so you can honor God?
Yeah.
And that's two different mindsets.
And if the heart's in the right place with that, it's not going to make it easy, but the path that you ultimately choose is going to be God honoring, I think, or he's going to honor your quest to honor him in difficult situations like this. Because I think we've all had it. There's plenty of times where you're like, I just can't support that anymore. And I don't want to be participatory in fueling that. Others, not so much. But it's also difficult, especially in a global economy. How many steps removed before it's okay? So for example, maybe I have difficulty investing in a company directly or buying a product, but do I put my money in a bank that lends to that company? Yeah. And this is a difference that in theology they will call formal evil and material evil. For those who really want to read more on it, formal evil is direct participation in something that is contrary to God or that's evil. And that's always a big no. You can never do it. Material evil is the indirect participation in that which leads to evil. There's a number of different examples that are kind of given to this. But let's say you make like high quality cutlery, right? And your company is selling to chefs and restaurants and collectors and things like that. But at some level, might someone also buy your product and do something horribly violent with it, right? That would be a material participation in evil. You are not creating and selling this in order to this horrible, violent end, but it is indirectly coming back to you in one way or another. Yeah. Formal evil, on the other hand, would be making a knife for this guy because he's like, I want to go butcher my family, and putting it in his hands, right? You see the difference?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I was watching a show. Was it on Prime or HBO or something? I don't know what it is, but the guy in it is a hitman, and it's very interesting to hear him like talk about his profession, and like, these people were going to die anyway because their spouse or whoever wanted them dead. I'm just the means to make that happen. Yeah. And you're like, ooh, that gets into some dicey territory.
Yeah, the way we could justify what we do, right?
Yeah, they were going to die. Someone was going to kill them.
Well, they're going to die
I'm just
at
getting
some
paid
point,
to do
right?
it.
Yeah.
You're like, I mean, if you can justify it for yourself that way, I guess. But
you do see that happen a lot. We fall into that trap. Well, it's going to happen anyway, or it was inevitable, or someone else would have done it, so I might as well benefit from it. Or yeah, no, dangerous territory there. Stay away.
Kelly says, and there's probably ignorant participation where you don't even know how involved you
all
are.
The time.
Probably.
All
I would
the time.
also say that there's one thing, like Maya likes a certain pair of shoes and a brand that may or may not use slave labor to make them. And that's been proven and known. And so it's like, so anytime she goes or asks for that particular pair of shoes or brand, I say, okay, well, this is how they're made, right? If you can live with that, then go ahead and wear them.
Yeah.
Buy them. But that's on you.
Yeah.
Why do you do that to me?
Because I'm your dad. But you could say that about...
That's what I do.
I would say you could probably say that about 90% of products that exist on the market. They're being made in China or Korea or somewhere else that is probably not operating fully above the bar, we should say. Like your iPhone, Apple, like so many companies have been called out on this. And at a certain point, it's like, some of these things are necessities to get through life. And what do you do about that?
This is where I think prophets have always been not only cool, but needed. Because like when you look at the biblical prophets, you take John the Baptist, you can take Ezekiel, you could take any number of people. They make a very conscious decision to live differently. And their life becomes a witness and a testimony against the things that we think are inevitabilities and necessities. And I think it's a mistake to think that we're all called to the prophetic life. But I do think they bring a good reminder and a good conviction back in that I think we need, because it's so easy to just drift into the morass of it all, as though, there's nothing I could do about it. Oh, well, I guess I just have to. That kind of, Eeyore mentality that we take, that passive spirituality, if you will, of, Yeah, great question.
I was even thinking about just like, where does the gas come from that we put in our cars?
Well, and you start
probably not anywhere good. Where are the cars
Yeah.
being made?
Yeah.
I don't know. They're probably not paying what I think they should be paying.
Well, and you're
people who
even
are doing
jumping
them.
just to the car. I mean, every
all the
part is
part,
outsourced.
every-
The marketing, the labor, yeah.
So-
At some level, material participation in evil is unavoidable.
because it's the world that we live in.
But it also shouldn't be an excuse to willingly embrace it, especially as we come deeper into the know of what our actions might indirectly be propelling. Yeah. All right.
So we got another one here that's a little lengthy in question. I might try to summarize a little bit.
Okay.
I have friends and family who claim that they are spiritual, in air quotes, spiritual. Some believe that there are many ways to heaven. Some believe that Muhammad or Buddha or any number of religions are okay. I'm not a great thinker or a great debater, but all I can think of is John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. To me, that Bible verse seems pretty direct. There's only one way, and that is through Jesus. I believe that God is a merciful God, and he alone decides who gets into heaven. So I would never say to a friend that they are damned. But what do I say to these people? I've told them gently what I believe to be true, but what more can I say?
Thanks so much for asking this. And you said I'm not a great thinker or a great debater. But the fact is, you've got a really clear grasp on this.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you're doing amazing things, not only in your thinking through it, but also in your action to these people. I mean, weren't you struck that at the end?
Yeah.
Where it's like, I've told them gently what I believe to be true, but what more can I say? I love the spirit that you're bringing to this. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Jesus said something very exclusive. He literally said, no, there is one way to the Father, and that's through me. As you quoted, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. And so if people aren't ready to hear, everything you say doesn't make much of a difference. So at some point, if you've spoken your piece and you've shared what you've thought, it's up to them to reciprocate. If they invite you into conversation, if they're open to talking about it, certainly pursue that out of love for these people and gently the way you're doing. And maybe the way you do it is simply this. Rather than coming down as being the authoritative truth on the matter, just go, I understand what you're saying, but, I read the New Testament and I look at Jesus saying this. Let Jesus defend himself. And you just ask them. So how do you get around what Jesus says? Because he seems to be saying something very different than you. Do you just think Jesus was wrong, or do you disagree with him? And they may, and that'll lead to another set of conversations, maybe about why you think Jesus is better to listen to. Don't try to win a debate. Don't try to, score a conversion.
Mm-hmm.
Love the people. Listen to what they're saying. Answer back appropriately, keep the conversation going, and pray for them in the meantime, and let God's word do the heavy lifting, in this. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that saying that you're spiritual used to be a way to kind of differentiate yourself from the church at large, or a specific denomination of like, oh, I was hurt by the Baptists or something, so I'm just spiritual now. I'm not that.
Yeah.
Where you're probably still sticking to 98% of the things that denomination or that religion taught, you're just not associating with it. So it's like, it's almost become its own religious sect in that, oh, I'm just spiritual, meaning that I don't agree with, or I don't stand in line with any denomination. So it's like, it's become its own denomination in that way.
And I'm going to speak in a way that might come across disrespectfully to people from this point of view, and again, I'm going to paint with a broad stroke here. I know this is not true of everyone out there, but far too often I actually see it being different. I see it being people who maybe haven't grown up in a church or don't believe like what a specific church kind of ingrained in them. I see it as people who are really kind of uninterested and maybe even too lazy of really aggressively pursuing spiritual answers from other people. They just like the idea of being deeper than materialistic. They want to be in touch with their feelings. They want to have good sentiments. They want to live moral lives to a degree, a morality often of their own making or what makes sense to them. But they don't really want to learn from anyone else. They just kind of want to do what they want. And at the same time, have that sense of being a little bit deep. If we're speaking about you today, please text in because, we'd love to open that conversation. And again, I know I'm speaking in a caricaturized kind of way. It's just something that I've seen a lot from people that use that kind of language.
Well, and going back to the original thought and question, I would have two things. One would be not everybody will hear and be saved, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality of it. Not everyone is going to hear it and understand it or believe it.
Yeah.
So that's hard to think about, especially when it comes to loved ones, because it's like, and I've had so many of those in my family.
Yeah.
But then also, like, as far as like trying to, and I think we mentioned this earlier, where you're never going to lawyer someone into believing. I think sometimes the biggest thing that we can do is just be imitators of Christ.
Yeah. And,
if they find some way that they see something different in you, then it's like, maybe that conversation comes up later and they're at a different point in their life, so. Yeah,
just watch something on Netflix. You guys see this yet? Come up in your queue, Father Stew.
I've seen that, but I haven't watched it.
It's good. It's worth your time. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Tina had an interesting take. Like, she watched it. She was kind of riveted. She caught it like midway and then like, I got to see the beginning of this. She's like, I really don't like any of these characters, but I love this movie. And it's just, it's Mark Wahlberg, it's Mel Gibson, and it's a true story. And
I've seen it.
I think you'd enjoy it.
I actually did want to watch it.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it's worth 2 hours of your life or whatever the length is.
Yeah, and it definitely brings in it brings in an interesting perspective on who's worthy to share God's gospel, who is the proper person to be doing this, and it's like, everyone can do. Anyone can do this. You can do this.
And it was the imitation thing that you mentioned, Steve, that really kind of jogged it to mind, because in the process, he ends up getting into the priesthood because he's trying to pick up a girl. And how she more or less, not directly leads him, but is the catalyst by which...
Kind of like my life story.
He comes in. I think it is like your life story there.
Got into music
just to get Barbie.
To get a woman.
He works in mysterious ways.
That's great.
No, but I liked it that it was I think it was made by Netflix, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it was something, it was a thing that was about the church and didn't put the church in a horrible light.
Yeah.
Which was kind of refreshing to see, because generally anything I've seen, it's like, oh, well, there was this scandal and we're going to make a movie about it. There was this sex scandal, this whatever corruption issues, in some way. No, it's just kind of the church being the church, which was nice.
And I thought with a pretty good, realistic impression of people too. It wasn't also like those cheesy Christian movies that try to whitewash everything or turn everything into kind of like a stereotype or cliche. And being that it was rooted in this guy's actual life, and they show at the end too, like they're giving dialogue like through the movie. And then they flash to the like actual Father Stu, who I won't say more, but it's like word for word dialogue that they actually grabbed from like his recordings or manuscripts or something that they built in. So
well, and in both Mel Gibson and Wahlberg, they're both producers, right? So maybe they probably came together to make this, I would imagine, because
you'd think, I don't know.
Would they consider themselves spiritual or Christian?
I don't know, because Gibson, he was the one that did The Passion.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a reputation for being a very devout conservative Catholic. And again, I don't follow him
Wahlberg
year to year. No, Gibson.
Oh, Gibson.
Yeah, I don't know about Wahlberg. But yeah, he did a great job in the role.
If either of you want to be on the podcast, we'd love to.
Yeah,
Talk to you.
we still got the invite out to Rob Bell if you'd like
Exactly.
to arm wrestle on the podcast. Mr. Gibson, Mr. Wahlberg, because I feel like we got to use Mr. now, at this level. But if you're listening here, we'd love to have you on, talk about your faith and Father Stu.
Yeah.
It's 1:30 p.m. Central, which means it's time to land the plane. So Mel Gibson, Mark Wahlberg, or Rob Bell, or anyone else listening today, you can text 815-314-0363. It can be a question, or it can be just a time to set up that meeting like we're hoping, all right?
Yeah.
If we didn't get to your question today, we will get to it. It is in our inbox. We always get a volume of questions higher than we're able to get through, but we're working at it. We're getting there. We want to help you every step of the way. If you've missed past recordings, you can catch us on Spotify or Apple or whatever your favorite podcast provider is, or simply visit fellowshipoffaith.org. Go to the FOF Plus page, and you will find them right there. We're out of time. God bless. Hope to catch you next week, 12:30 p.m. Central.